Hi. This is my first time doing this. Putting anything on recording. I'm doing this because I have thoughts. All of America has thoughts, one way or another, about the election, about what's been going on worldwide, nationally. So I wrote something because it got stuck in my head and I had to write it. It's a bit long for most formats, and I don't want to just post up a huge wall of text. It can get intimidating. Um, so I thought I would record for everybody who might be curious to know what my random thoughts are about the actual impact of, from my perspective, of what has been going on both here in the United States and, worldwide with this election and everything in general that we've seen in 2020. I didn't realize until just now that it could caption all of 2020. But here we go, and I will be reading what I wrote, so if I look a little weird. So here we go. In the act one of the musical Hamilton, there's a line about halfway through the song Yorktown that says, "And so the American experiment begins." As Hamilton narrates the situation of where his friends are in relation to the cumulative and decisive battle that took place in Yorktown, Virginia. This battle saw the end of the American Revolution. It is the opening of this country as being its own governing state. You see, before that, America was just an idea, a what if. It started when a handful of men put literally everything on the line to tell England we weren't going to pay for a king's mistakes, that we weren't going to turn a blind eye to being bullied by a nation that was, at the time, bullying almost everyone. They knew that if they lost the fight, more than just their own lives would be on the line. It would be the lives of their families as well. But they decided that it was worth it, and they spoke up about the injustices that they saw being done to them. When we finally gained our independence as a new nation, when we finally gained our independence, we became a new nation. We were flawed, but we acknowledged that. Our founders looked at history, pinpointed what had worked and what had not. They began to mold the nation using what they found and what had worked historically. They tried to streamline it. They knew hot topics like slavery would be addressed later, once they figured out how the nation would actually work. What people forget is that in the very beginning, we tried a confederated approach very early on. This was where each state pretty much did its own thing and just kind of checked in with the federal government on what was going on in their state. Ultimately, this did not work. And this isn't Civil War Confederacy we're talking about. This is even before then, even before we had a Bill of Rights. This was while all of those core essential papers were being drafted. We were kind of a confederation of United States. And then we became the United States, a constitutional United States, and we became a republic. So they went back to the drawing board and eventually came up with what we have now. Like I said, a republic of a United States. They created a system of checks and balances, and that system has endured for about 244 years. Then they called us the American experiment. No one knew if it would work or for how long. But it was adaptive and it would mold itself in time as was needed, so long as people kept in mind those founding principles and kept level heads. And we see now how that went. You see, we still are this great American experiment. We always will be. So long as we remain a nation, we will be. And we have been tried and tested and shaped and reshaped as time has gone on. And if you look at America as a whole, we paint a diverse but very beautiful picture. Sure, there are some dark stains in it, some areas we still need to work on. But it is a wonderful picture if you think about it, because we know they are there. And we're slowly working on smoothing out those dark areas and edges. Now, in recent years, we've heard the phrase, "Make America Great Again," over and over. And then it adapted to "Keep America Great." When I first heard these phrases, my heart broke. And at the same time, I heard the hearts of my ancestors and of all of our forebears and founding fathers breaking. When had we stopped being great? Were we no longer the great American experiment? You see, many others were wondering the same thing. The country was moving forward. We were adapting to the needs of the people, of the climate, and of the culture of the day, just as we had time and again, just as we were meant to do. To those of us who see events contextually in history, or as how they fall in history compared to the rest of history, we were horrified. I was horrified. I watched each major stride we had made as a country. And as a people, they were slowly beginning to unravel. This new chapter of our experiment was a terrifying one compared to the rest of the tapestry. And yeah, there's some really evil stuff in there. Things we hadn't thought about in generations. Because of the forward momentum of the nation, we're suddenly blindingly in everyone's face. I could now understand the shock and horror of people who had lived generations ago. The uncertainty. And I was witnessing acts of desperation from all fronts of those who are just as blindsided by this new chapter of our nation. The who's and whats of this are not important. It all depends on where in the fracas you fall, or where you fell when they were happening, on your individual experience and views that has shaped this picture. Now we're entering a new chapter. No matter how the cards fell, it would have always been a new chapter. You see, each chapter of the Great American Experiment begins and ends with each election. And this is something that I think many Americans have forgot. This is a concept that is outlined in the same musical, Hamilton. You know, during Hamilton's soliloquy, during The World Was Wide Enough, Hamilton states, "America, you great unfinished symphony." And so she was always meant to be. They also forget that to look at the lessons learned from the previous chapters and to realize that we are an adaptive, not a traditional country. We were not meant to remain any one thing. We were meant to adapt and change with the needs of our nation and her people first, to be a beacon of what could be to the rest of the world. We were never meant to cling to traditions, not of our past. We were meant to adapt them into our own traditions as the nation and the world changed. We were meant to honor our past as we move forward into the future. So now I ask you to stop, to think, to look back on history and where we came from, where you came from, and where you are now. Where do you want to see us go? What do you want to leave behind? What would your ancestors say if they could see you now? To see what became of their contribution to this nation? Just stop and think. Now think beyond that. And think with compassion. And think with empathy. Think about what others see and experience. Think about the whole picture that is this great American experiment and the chapter that we are about to write together as one nation, indivisible. One made up of a whole puzzle of beliefs and cultures that were meant to fit together. Because the minute we stop doing that, that is the minute we are truly no longer great. That is the minute this nation fails. And that is when the great American experiment that started 244 years ago, that is when it ends. Just think. And that is my entirety of it. That is what I wrote. I don't know if it really, I don't know. But those are my feelings and my thought on everything. So yeah. Thanks for listening.